Folks, we're back. This is Steve Sampson and Stephanie Phillips with another episode of Veterans in Politics. We have Dr. Aury Nagy, candidate for Nevada's Congressional District number 3. But before we get to Dr. Nagy.
Thank you. Hi.
Stephanie.
Hi. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. And thank you to our sponsors. We have Simplify Heating and Cooling. It's getting hot out there, so give them a call if you need your system checked. Their website is callsimplify.com, callsimplify.com. We also have Henderson City Mayor, Michelle Romero. She is running for re-election. Her website is votemichelleromero.com, votemichelleromero.com. Jump on there and get in touch with her. Also, we have a new one, Angelo Carvalho. He's running for Board of Regents, District 3. And his website is carvalho4nevada.com. And that's the number 4. Carvalho4nevada.com. Jump on his website and see what he's all about. He is a veteran and he's going to be a great candidate and be great for our higher education system. Also, we have a merch store. It's vipimerch.com, vipimerch.com. We have all kinds of things on there for you guys to check out. So jump on there. Also, we're planning our Valentine's Ball. It is February 7th of 2026. And we're going to have early bird tickets on sale this summer. So be on the lookout for that. Also, grab your copy of Steve's book, How to Navigate Nevada's Family Court System. It is on Amazon. It's $14.99. If you are a litigant going through family court and you don't have an attorney and can't afford one, grab this book. It is a self-help book and it will help you navigate that system. Also, our consulting business, vipiconsulting.com. We are taking on candidates for the 26th election, so get in touch with us on that. And for my rant, this was so disgraceful, but I have to mention, the end of the legislative session was, Monday night, I believe. So the Senate took a recess, and the lieutenant governor walked out and was using the restroom. And that's what their recess was for. But while he was gone, the interim president, pro tem Marilyn Dondero Loop, is that her name? It's a long name. Yeah. So she decided to go ahead and continue without the lieutenant governor, knowing that he was outside and he couldn't get back in. And thank goodness for Ira Hansen. He objected and said that the lieutenant governor was outside. And I think that they were trying to get some business done in the few minutes that the lieutenant governor was outside. I don't know what they were trying to do. It was appalling. It was disgraceful. Democrats, don't act like that. That was absolutely ridiculous. And Edgar Flores, your name was mentioned, and I would like to know if you know what was going on up there. I don't know why your name was particularly mentioned, but get in touch with us and let us know about that. But anyway, so they let the lieutenant governor back in so he could finish presiding over this hearing, which he is the president of. I guess they forgot that little detail. Anyway, we love you, Stavros. But that's it.
Oh,
did I miss?
No, that was quite short.
Anything? Short.
Compared to last week.
I know.
I don't have anything.
Okay.
Dr. Nagy, how you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me on your show.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming. Could you give us a bio?
Sure. I grew up here in Las Vegas.
I've never seen him. Have you seen him?
Yeah, we just saw him not too long ago.
He grew up here.
Oh, well.
Been here 30 years. I
know, me too.
Where do you go clubbing at?
He doesn't. He's too busy being doctor.
Sorry.
No worries.
Please continue.
Yeah, no. So I was born in New York, moved here when I was 4. My folks were doctors. My dad was the first cancer doctor here in Las Vegas. And I went to Gorman, and then I went to Yale. And for med school, I went to Baylor. And then I did my neurosurgery in Virginia at George Washington University. I got the Harvey Cushing Clinical Fellowship, named for the founder of neurosurgery. I studied brain-machine interfaces. I was interested in bypassing spinal cord injury. I had got to go to all of the NIH lectures in DC while I was out there. And I had come to the conclusion they weren't going to get a biological cure to spinal cord injury. And so we'd have to do electronic bypass. So a lot of the stuff that Elon Musk is doing now, I studied, about 20 years ago.
Wow.
And then I came back to Las Vegas because I thought, I wanted to help make medicine better here. So I eventually, joined a practice here. I joined the Board of Medical Examiners. I became president. I was also president of the, I was chairman of the Department of Neurosurgery at UMC for a while. I was advisor to a U.S. Congress on health information technology, and served on the governor's workforce board under Sandoval on healthcare, and did a lot. I mean, ran a federally qualified health center for a while. I was a chairman for that, and just tried to get very active in improving healthcare in the state. One of the things I'm very proud of is I was one of the first people outside of the military to bring a transcranial magnetic stimulation here to treat depression. And so that was, we got to see a lot of dramatic improvement in people's lives based on that. We did much, much better than published literature. Published literature at the time was a 35% success rate, and we were getting like a 95% success rate. And I wasn't sure what we were doing differently until the guys from Stanford published something, and they were about a 93% success rate. So I was like, okay, our results must be valid then, because it seems like we're doing that good work.
So why are you running for Congress?
So I got really angry about the...
You're making a lot of money being a neurosurgeon? You guys make, what, $800 million?
It'll be
nice
on his financials when he files.
I think they used to. I think
they make from 500 on up.
I think they used to do very, very well. And healthcare overall has taken a hit. Okay. And the reimbursements that everybody makes have gone down. The system that all the doctors operate in makes it very, very difficult for them to pursue the best interest of their patients. Mm-hmm. And that's frustrating. And the entities that are in control of that design it that way intentionally. So they're intentionally trying to create obstacles to providing appropriate care. And they try to make it so confusing and so labyrinthine that people can't find their way through it, and they get frustrated and they just quit. And it's become so difficult, and the lobbyists that they send to create laws on their behalf, both at the federal level and at the state level, have so much influence that people feel that there's no hope. Both people within the healthcare system, the doctors and nurses or out there taking care of patients, and the patients themselves are just like, I give up. It's overwhelming. And so it's to the point that people, feel like there's no recourse through laws. They can't talk to the legislators because they're all influenced by these, very influential donors and lobbyists. So, it resulted this last year in violence, right? They assassinated the CEO of United Healthcare, presumably because they felt there was no other way to have their voice heard or to affect a change. And so, the purpose of elected officials is they're supposed to be changing the laws before it has to come to that. That was the whole purpose of the Constitution, right? It was they founded the country so that we could have this turnover in leadership so that the people could have their voice heard and change laws and avoid a violent revolution every 4 years, right? And so when that can't happen, that's why you have this kind of activity. And so, when I was president of the Board of Medical Examiners, we came under attack quite a bit for being the root cause of why healthcare is so bad. And part of the issue was we were taking a long time with licensing. That part we owned, and we fixed it while I was there. We brought it from 6 months down to about 40 days. And hopefully they can get it down to about 3 weeks in this next cycle. But once we fixed that and they were still attacking us, I was kind of like, if you guys really want to have this discussion about what's wrong with healthcare, I will have this with you. And so then I went out on the attack. I started going after the large institutions that really are profiting off the pain, death, and suffering of the people in my community. This is my hometown. I grew up here. I love my state. And I just saw these people, causing harm and death with impunity. There was nobody who seemed to be able to stop them or go after them or hold them accountable. And that's not right. That's not how it's supposed to be. It's not fair. So,
are those big pharmaceutical companies?
Pharmaceutical companies, insurance companies, hospitals, the giant hedge funds that practice medicine. All of these entities have a sort of efficiency as their model, or are in the business of putting profits before patients. And there are ways to restructure things so that the people who lead those companies have appropriate incentives, and that they're once again putting patients first. Now they lobby heavily to prevent that from happening, but we could return things to the way they used to be back when we were leading the world in the healthcare. And I think if we do that, it's going to save the country a tremendous amount of money, and people will be a lot healthier, a lot happier. And that's why I'm running. I think we can make that happen.
Okay. Would you willing to advocate for federal funding for water recycling here in Nevada?
That seems like a reasonable goal. I don't see why that would be a bad goal. Yeah, I mean, what would be the negative to that?
You know what's going on with the Colorado River and California getting almost all of the water here.
Yeah.
Would you do something about that?
So I talked to one of the governors here. It was Sisolak, and we had put forward a plan in terms of talking to the folks in Mexico about putting a desalination plant down on the ocean there, and then exchanging the water rights that they had for water rights that we had. So if we had sort of funded the operation of a solar facility, that we would then gain the rights to the water that they would have, and that would supply the water we need here in Las Vegas. And he was in favor of that. In fact, he was the one who sort of suggested rather than building a pipeline, you just swap the rights, because he knew what that process was like.
Is there a way to convert seawater into drinking water?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, how come California is not doing that?
I don't think they have to. I think they're getting a big share of our water supply. So they have all the water they want.
They haven't been forced to yet.
Yeah.
What about affordable housing here in our state? Is there any type of federal grants that you could do to?
Well, whenever I talk to anybody about, hey, if you could ask your congressperson to do something for Nevada, what would be the best thing they could do for Nevada? And a lot of people were saying, well, you could free up federal land so they can build more housing out here. And if there's more housing, the idea is that the prices drop, which, you increase the supply, the price ought to fall. And that makes a lot of sense. I talked to April Becker about that, and she's, on the county commission, and they're in charge to some degree of zoning and licensing facilities. She was telling me I think she said 60,000 acres of infill land that hasn't been utilized because people can't or aren't interested in bringing the power and the water out to it. So I've got a meeting coming up with one of the big developers out here who apparently thinks that if we release more land, they're willing to bring that out there. And so I'm eager to have that discussion. We've also had the discussion about, how markets are supposed to work. So, you're supposed to have supply and demand, and the optimized version of things that provides for the most efficacious utilization of resources, right? So the local supply of land, so all the homeowners who are looking to sell, and all the people who want to buy and move into a place, if they could interact in a market without interference, you'd get equitable home prices that people could afford. But what you have inserted on top of that is all the money in the world. So all of the free capital in the world, all these speculators come in and they jack up the price for all the homes here. And there are a lot of tools that you can use to change that and make that more difficult. And I've been trying to have discussions with people about whether that's the right thing to do or not. And the folks at the Nevada Realtors Association, they're very much in favor of making it more difficult for these giant like hedge fund type operations to buy homes here. Because for them, it means a lot of turnover, a lot of sales. You think for all the young people out here who are struggling to get a home, it means that homes would become more affordable for them. The folks who would be the losers on that would be the people who've taken a second mortgage on their home. A lot of retirees have done that. But you could soften that blow if you passed a law that made it illegal for the banks, or that prevented the banks from revaluing their loans and then forcing them to cash out. Like once they've done the loan, at this point, you just leave that price alone, and that would protect them until there's resale. But if they're a retiree and that's their forever home, that's less of an issue.
How would you get BLM to release? And that's not Black Lives Matters, folks. That's Bureau of Land Management. They had the name first, just so you know. How would you get BLM to release? Because Nevada is 87% owned by the federal government. How would you get BLM to release that land?
So that's a Department of Interior issue. And so I would have to ask to be put on the Department of the Interior in order to have that authority.
Right.
And or I would have to find things on whatever committee they do put me on that we could use to create value for the people who are on that committee, and then trade that with them. I mean, ultimately, a lot of what happens in Congress is horse trading, right? Trading this favor for that favor, and hopefully being able to take home a big prize for your state.
Would you offer tax credit to builders?
I don't know if I did. Does Congress have that authority? That's mostly a state authority, I think.
I'm sure that there's some federal tax credits you could offer them for them to come in here and build. Not state or the local tax, the federal tax credits.
I mean, construction is a huge part of the Nevada economy. I know Las Vegas, kind of lives and dies on our ability to continue to do construction. Back in 2008, when construction halted, this city didn't quite become a ghost town, but it really thinned out. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea to offer tax credits like that. One of the things I did think that would be good was finding a way to help with the prices of the construction materials, because that way, if the materials are lower, and then we can produce more of those materials here in the U.S. For instance, steel frame. Because I know one of the interests that Donald Trump had was to revitalize the steel industry in the U.S. And if we have these tariffs with Canada, and the price of lumber has gone up, so the alternative to lumber is steel construction. So if they maintain these tariffs with Canada, then price of U.S. steel will rise. If they subsidize that for builders, all of a sudden there's a huge market internally for steel for the construction industry, and everybody in America is winning on that basis, it seems. At least that's the first pass analysis on that. But I think we can make that win.
Well, I have something more in your field, Medicare and Medicaid funding. How would you provide that to the underserved areas here in our state?
So I think there's a lot of cleanup that needs to be done at the Bureau of Primary Health Care.
Explain about cleanup. What do you mean by that?
So the Bureau of Primary Health Care sits underneath the Department of Health and Human Services, and the way in which they allocate the grants to areas in need is not quite straightforward and not always done in an honest fashion. When we were part of that process, there were people within that chain who asked for bribes, and that was very odd, because you don't expect that. You figure you're getting this grant and you're going to just do the good work and you're going to help people, and the people who are there releasing the money to you say, well, you're going to need to pay us if you're going to hire us as consultants in order to make sure that you're using the funds properly. And so they get very, very, very nasty when you tell them that you're not going to pay them a bribe. And and I imagine
no bribes here.
It's because the money goes all the way back up to DC, and they have a lot of control over how that money goes out. And of course, they're only going to want to give it to people who are sending the money back up. And I think you could get more of those institutions out here, and you could get more of those institutions that are utilizing the money in ways that benefit the people it's supposed to, if the bribery situation is cleared up. Because if they're all getting bribed, they don't really care that the institutions are operating effectively or efficiently, or they're using the resources that they have well. So that would be one thing that could be done to immediately improve the quality of care that's delivered here in Nevada and really nationally. And that would be one simple thing to do to lower the cost of healthcare.
All right, let's talk a little bit about veterans issues.
Wait, let's go back to healthcare for a second. Hold on, because I want to hit COVID.
Mm-hmm.
How did you think they handled that? Did you agree with the mask? Did you agree with the vax mandates? Because a lot of voters, especially Republicans, were very upset. That's one of the main reasons I got into politics, because I was very upset with what they were doing to the American people. So what was your take on all of that?
Yeah, I was very angry about all of that. So when COVID happened in December 2020, we saw the first couple of patients starting to get sick. By about mid-January 2020, the entire medical ICU was full, the entire surgical ICU was full. Half of the ER was full, all patients, on supplemental oxygen, fighting for their lives, trying not to die. And lots of them were dying. And so in February, they shut down the elective surgeries at the operating room, so I had time to read. I thought my patients were going to have questions about this, so I became an expert, read everything I could find published on the disease and the pathways. And by March, I was looking forward to the trial that they were going to run in April on a drug that they thought was going to cure it. They had the consensus was the disease has two phases. First is a viral replication phase that most people shrug off like any other flu. And then a small percentage of people go on to this overactive immune response, that cytokine storm you heard about, that was fatal for a lot of people. And the cytokines are small immune molecules. And the one that was driving things was called interleukin 6. And so they had an antibody to that. So they were going to try to use that in April of 2020. And by May of 2020, they decided that didn't work. And then they went the different direction. But I looked at that study. I said, I don't think they're wrong. I don't think they're right about that. I think that they just misunderstood why the drug didn't work. And it's because it's too big of a molecule to go out to where the inflammation's happening. It's 150 kilodalton in size, and the holes in your capillaries are 15. So it couldn't get out to where it needed to be. So you need a small molecule. So we found a small molecule that does that. And in like late June, we were certain of that. And then it took another three and a half months to convince any doctor to try it. And then in September, some of the docs over here at Centennial Hills Hospital started using the drug. And by October, they were using it on all of their patients. And by November, they said, hey, Aury, you have to write this up. This is a big deal. And so they gave me their data on December 10th. And in 15 days, I finished a paper on what we had found. So we had 78 patients who we treated consecutively with the drug. And we compared that to a group of 44 consecutive patients from basically it was October through December compared to June through August.
I try not to talk about COVID too much because you mentioned COVID. Every interview I've talked about COVID or mentioned COVID, they take it down. They say it's false information no matter what you say.
Well, I was the president of the board of medical examiners in the state of Nevada.
I'm telling you, every single interview that I've had about COVID, they have taken down every video. Well,
did you agree with the mask mandates? And forcing people to put masks on their kids and all that, and closing the school for a year.
In retrospect, I think they would have done just as well without the masks and just letting people get immunity. Because in the end, I think everybody in the country has been exposed to the disease, and then
the vax or supposed vax. It wasn't really a vax; it was a experimental drug. It didn't work. People still got sick with it.
I was upset about the way they did the vaccine. It's unclear to me why they couldn't use the standard mechanism that we had for vaccines. This whole experimental mechanism later, was demonstrated to cause harm. So when I was president of the board of medical examiners, I had to, there were a lot of doctors who were afraid of getting censured if they were trying alternative therapies. I told them as long as I'm there, they were not going to have any problem. I would make sure of that. And then when there was but people would send me their stories about, hey, I got this vaccine and now, so-and-so is sick or having this problem. And there's one guy, his uncle died about a month after he got the vaccine. And he would send me every piece of literature he found about, negative things. But finally, he sent me a video of a guy named Philip Buchholz, who was a molecular biologist from South Carolina, who presented his data to the South Carolina legislature. And because it's part of the legislative record in that state, it couldn't be taken down. And so you were able to go probably still log on and watch Philip Buchholz talk about what he found when he did a PCR expansion on the mRNA vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna. And so in the lipid nanovesicles, in addition to the mRNA, he found they also had DNA in there. And they're not supposed to. They're only supposed to have the mRNA. If there's DNA, there's a chance that the DNA can jump into your own genes and cause problems. It can cause, if it jumps into a section that codes for a protein, the protein can misfold, and that can cause an autoimmune reaction, or the protein can malfunction. And if that's a tumor suppressor gene, that can cause cancer potentially. And so I spent about a month and a half trying to find a flaw with what this guy had said. But I couldn't find one. I have a background in molecular biology from undergrad, and so finally I wrote to the FDA. I said, "Look, I'm the president of the board of medical examiners of the state of Nevada. My constituents have these concerns about the COVID vaccine. Can you please send me information that can allay their fears on these specific issues. So after about a month, they sent back a letter and they said, hey, we're sure that you have are already aware of the information we sent to Joe Lopato, but here's a copy of that. And in addition to that, the things that you've said are preposterous for these reasons, and here's a reference for that. And here's the manufacturing protocol that was abided by, and here's a reference for that. So I kind of looked at the things that they had said. And so for Joseph Lopato is the Surgeon General for Florida. So he's an MD, PhD trained guy from Harvard, a very intelligent guy. And so he was very anti the COVID vaccine. The letter that they had sent him and the response they had said to me essentially said, first, it's impossible for the DNA to jump into your own genome once it gets into the cell. And the paper they sent me was from the year 2004. So I sent them back 4 papers from the last 3 years that said the opposite of that. And I said, are these papers relevant to this discussion? Then they said, well, we abided by all the manufacturing standards for vaccines, and here are the manufacturing standards. But that was dated 2010. And I said, well, that was before they invented mRNA vaccines. And so it doesn't apply to the mRNA vaccines. Plus, they work by such totally different mechanisms. I don't know how you're even implying that this could have any relevance for the mRNA vaccines. And then the third thing they had sent was a document signed off on by like 30 PhDs who had gone to the site to do the evaluation for to make sure the vaccines were being manufactured according to the standards they were supposed to be. And but for that one, I had just gone through this FDA drug approval process because we'd found that drug that seemed to be working successfully, and we'd combined that generic with another one, and we'd gone to apply to the FDA. We presented to BARDA, the Biomedical Advanced Research Development Authority. We had applied to the NIH. All these people said, yeah, our science is solid. So I knew that process. So when they sent me back this document signed off on by these PhDs, I was like, yeah, but they didn't do this and that step. And here they were supposed to do that. Why didn't they do that? And how come you didn't ask them to do this? And there was like a whole slew of at least 20 errors or just like things that they chose to not pursue, but I think a reasonable person would have. And then when it came down to the vaccine adverse reporting schedule, they indicated that 1 in 7,000 people who had gotten the vaccine had a negative myocardial event. So, but the death rate from COVID in the general population was far, far less than 1 in 7,000. So I said, how are you going to go out there and ask people to take on a risk of, that's higher than the risk from the disease itself? That just doesn't make sense. And so, I sent them back that in a polite way. I said, look, we'd like your response to this, to answer these questions. We're going to try to plan to do research here in Nevada to duplicate that Philip Buchholz study and find out if, in fact, his data are accurate. If they are, then we're going to have, a very serious discussion. If they're not, then I can put to rest the fears that people have here. And so then I went to the Clark County Medical Society to sort of get support, ask the governor for funding to run that study over here, and they declined because they were a pretty left-leaning body. It was they were a very left-leaning body, to be honest.
He was copying everything that Newsom was doing in California during that time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. That's what people wanted to do here. They wanted to do whatever they're doing in California. Mm-hmm. It was bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so again, that whole experience kind of left me quite a bit disillusioned about the intent of the people in our government to protect us. Because one of the purposes of U.S. government and particularly in foreign policy is they talk when they do the recruiting for the military, right? When I was in high school and they used to have the Scholastics magazines, and you look on the back, there's always some guy coming up out of the muck with a machine gun. Mm-hmm. And it was always like, well, why is the guy doing that? Why do we need so many like assassin squads and whatever, or these this huge military? And it's to defend the American interest. Mm-hmm. And so I spent some time thinking, well, what does that mean? What is the American interest? And so I came to the conclusion that what that means is 2 things. The first thing that it means the defense of American health and property. So when we send people out there, they are protecting Americans, their health, and after that their property. And then the second thing that it means, the defending the American interest, is to go out to secure assets controlled by foreign entities and deliver those assets into the control of American entities. I mean, that's good foreign policy for any country, and that's America's foreign policy too. And so I thought, how does this COVID vaccine fit into that? And I thought, well, the COVID vaccine is a device created by people in the United States that they are now selling to every man, woman, and child in the world. And that is going to result in a tremendous amount of transfer of treasure to American control. And so there is some argument that can be made that people who would be trying to develop a cure as we were doing could be doing something that's against the American interest. And that's a very tough thing to think about, right? That there are people who think that the American interest is to allow this many Americans to die. Now, when a president makes a decision to send people into war, he knows some of those people that he's going to send over to that foreign country are going to die. And he makes it with full knowledge of that decision, and he decides this thing that we're gaining for America is worth the sacrifice. That's got to be an incredibly hard decision to make, right? But they make it. The thing is the people who they were sacrificing here in America, if those kinds of decisions were being made in our country, were for civilians. They were innocent, and they were, in the hundreds of thousands. And that, I think, is, inappropriate on every level. And I'm furious that people were able to make decisions like that, thought was appropriate, and execute it on a plan like that.
Okay. Are you willing to expand funding for VA hospitals in rural areas and on tribal land?
Yeah, I think that's appropriate. I think there are plenty.
How would you go about doing that?
That's a great question. I haven't really explored that question a lot. One thing I did do a little while ago is I had some folks over to the house. There's a friend of mine who his sister works for RFK, and they do a debrief with the president every 2 weeks. And he was came up through is a enlisted guy, and then he went through Walter Reed, and he became a big surgeon and super talented, and invented a new device for people who've lost limbs. It's really great technology. And so he was invited to go to Washington to talk to folks over there about what veterans need in healthcare. And so I happen to know a lot of folks who are doing like charity work with veterans. I know Ryan Patrick, who works with Life by Music. They teach veterans to play musical instruments and sort of recover from traumas. And Dave Marlin, who runs that Veteran Stronger, that deals with a lot of folks who've got addiction issues and helps them through that. And Vivian Kiravan, who works with Marines, the Marine Corps League, and another Blue Forest company. They are working on getting psilocybin approved to treat PTSD. And so I brought those and a couple other folks to meet with Ron before he went off to DC to go talk with folks, because Ron's been in the military forever. He knows a lot about what's wrong over there. But these people have their own point of view on it, and maybe they could feed him information that would be useful for the president to find out about, right? And so although I don't know everything about these issues myself, I do have access to a lot of right people. Now I know you guys too. So I'll have access to people who can tell us the right thing to do in that direction. In terms of when you're going to go fund something and increase funding for it, that means you have to take away some funding from something else, right? So the two ways that can happen, that you're going to fund something.
Maybe those condoms that they're sending to Syria, bro.
Yeah, Afghanistan, or right.
Yeah,
there's a lot of wasteful spending that we
I was so happy about the stuff they were doing at Doge. I didn't find so much of this wasteful spending, and hopefully they're going to be able to have Congress start to eliminate the authorizations for the spending, so they can redirect it to things that are purposeful and useful like this. But the other way you do it is you create value. You find ways to help the United States create value both internally and through trade with external countries. And I think there are some interesting things that we can do along those lines as well.
How about those funding for the federal funding for educational purposes? What would you do about that? Because I know the Biden administration was trying to do that forgiveness loan? And
forgiving student loans,
and then the Trump administration wants them to pay. What's your take on that? I mean, do you have student loans right now?
I know my loans are paid off at this point.
How long ago?
Well, forever. Yeah. So I was very fortunate. I did not have to I did not have to do it. My parents.
Well, how would you help those folks that's not fortunate?
I've kind of thought a lot about that. My degree in undergrad, I did biochemistry and economics, and I spent a lot of years trying to understand what's going on at the Federal Reserve and how credit's created and why. And, looking at the Federal Reserve is run by a board of governors and it's represented by all of these banks. And those banks tend to profit every time any policy in the United States is created that increases the overall debt burden for the country and the citizens within it. And in terms of the loans that have been put forward by allowing these lots of student loans in this way, it led to a huge inflation in the costs of university education. It didn't used to be nearly as expensive as now. In terms of the pathway that Biden chose, I did like it because I thought it was very pro the citizens of America. The last bailouts that had happened had all been, favoring the most wealthy people and the most wealthy institutions in America. And I thought if they're going to have to try to get us through this economic period by causing inflation, it seems a better way to cause inflation by increasing consumer demand and giving it to the people who are, feeling the pain and struggling, than by giving it to these sort of giant credit creating entities that are going to utilize that to have some other huge, basically hedge fund that they're going to loan the money to start to acquire other entities within the country and then try to squeeze more efficiency out of everything there. I think what you find is that when you provide money and opportunity to the people within the country, they find the better way to utilize those resources productively because it gets funneled to the things they need because that's what they're spending on. And when you can sort of give it to the people who are centralized, they're up there trying to guess where the money needs to go and kind of gambling with, where it's just, I think the Biden approach was appropriate in that instance.
Do you agree with Trump dismantling the Department of Education?
I think the rationale behind that was that there was so much money hidden within the Department of Education that was being utilized for tasks and purposes that did not serve the best interests of America, that he thought it was better to burn it down and rebuild it again afterwards. And so what appears to be the case is that they will continue to supply funding to the school systems, but it's not going to be through the Department of Education. It'll be through other actions. Although I'm not fully brought up to speed on that. So.
Well, Dr. Nagy, we're starting to run out of time. We have another show right after you.
Okay.
And Mark's going to zoom in on you, and then if we missed anything you'd want to relay, you could please do that. Tell people to come vote for you and your point of contact, your website or anything like that.
Our website is Nagy for Congress. It'd be fantastic if you guys could take a look at it and donate. I think the reason to vote for me as opposed to anybody else who's running is because I really think we can fix healthcare in America. It turns out that healthcare is the single biggest expenditure of the U.S. government. 27% of the amount of money they spend goes to healthcare. I think we can reduce healthcare costs by 30%, so that'd be 10% of government expenditures could be eliminated. If we can change the incentive programs in healthcare to make things more efficient, not efficient in the way that corporate America tends to think of it, but more efficient in that the money stays in the communities that are providing the care and is better directed to actually providing care by removing a lot of the middlemen who stand between the patients and the people who are taking care of them. I think that's the best way to fix America.
Well, Dr. Nagy, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Phillips, thank you. Folks, that's Dr. Aury Nagy, candidate for Nevada's Congressional District number 3. We hope that he was very informative, and we hope that when you go to the voting booth, you are more educated on these congressional candidates. This is Steve Sampson, Stephanie Phillips, Veterans in Politics. Until next time.